This week on the Catholic Money Show, we are sitting down to talk with a real life couple to hear more about their relationship and how money plays a part in it. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Catholic Money Show. We are so excited for this episode that is debuting today. One of the things that we get asked about often is, how do we get on the same page? This is coming from married couples. How do we actually merge our money story? How do we not just settle for always having financial conversations be tense? How do we actually enjoy talking about this and not feel like we are, getting a root canal when we're trying to budget together? And so many of you have requested, can you show us the process? Can you tell us more stories? You've heard our story, Jonathan and I's, but we want to start highlighting stories from other Catholic couples who are doing this, who have done this, put in the hard work, and actually merged their money. And today on the episode, we have Renzo and Monica Ortega of Pre-Cana with the Pope podcast, and they are joining us here to share their story. Welcome, guys.
Thank you guys so much for having us.
Thank you.
I would love. I hope by the end of the episode you could teach us how to not make it feel like a root canal, because I still hate budgeting. It still feels like that for me. But it's
even we're Jonathan and I are almost 11 years into this. You guys almost 10 years into your marriage.
Yeah.
There's always going to be things that come up, bumps in the road, but once you have the tools to know how to process through that, you can get through it as easily as possible, right? When you're dealing with two fallen individuals trying to navigate something together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Less, more smooth than it probably was in the early days when you were just.
That's for sure.
Yes, that is. Yeah.
Yes, making progress. So would you guys mind, just before we dive in, sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we can start diving into your story.
Sure.
Yeah. So like you said, we're Renzo and Monica. We started dating in high school. We were high school sweethearts. We dated through college, and got married after Monica graduated. I proposed, and I had very little income at that point, but I still took the dive. And right now we have the podcast, like you said, Pre-Cana with the Pope. And we've just been really moved to try to help restore confidence in marriage and family life. We know how difficult marriage is. We know how many mixed messages there are out there, and we've really been trying to build couples up and really help them navigate all the murkiness that is with putting two lives together. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we were so excited to be invited to be with you guys tonight was because one of the things that we get feedback a lot from is how people seem to understand the sacrament and they understand the spirituality of it, but then they're like, okay, but then real life starts, and how do you do real life together? Isn't praying supposed to fix everything? And you're kind of like, no, there's practical to it. There's money stuff to do with it, and there's communication, and so our hope with our ministry at To Become Family and using the podcast Pre-Cana with the Pope is to try to highlight how those two things come together, and how Catholicism and a Catholic marriage is really this holistic picture and this holistic way of living. So I'm excited to talk specifically tonight about finances, and also communicating about finance.
Awesome. Thank you for being willing to share that. And just today, I was actually in the car going to pick up our girls they go to a hybrid homeschool. And I tuned into Danielle Bean's recent podcast with Beth Shree. Her and her husband, Ted Shree, wrote a book recently about the messiness of marriage. And I haven't read it, but just based on the conversation, I wanted to. It sounds like you guys run into this too, of people coming to marriage thinking we have our faith and that's all we need. And so this will be easy, right? We're not going to be like the culture, and we're not going to face the same obstacles. But I think the reality in Catholic marriage is often that we face the same obstacles. We just happen to have sacramental grace in order to combat them. It's no different. It's still as hard. It's just as messy. And so thank you for being willing to dive into this particular area that can get so hairy and so messy
Sure.
for couples, and being willing to share your own story. So with that, could you take us back to before you guys got married and your families of origin? How was money talked about, viewed, and what kind of habits did you kind of leave home with?
Mm. Um, so for me, I came from an interesting background because my parents divorced when I was younger, and my biological dad and then my mom and my stepdad handled money very, very differently.
Hmm.
So I kind of was able to see almost two ends of the spectrum. My biological dad will quickly admit he's not great with money, and then my mom and my stepdad were much more financially successful, but they didn't really talk much about that. Like I know that they did investing. They talked about like stocks and bonds, but they never necessarily like taught specifically like how to invest and what to invest in and things like that. But they did teach me the importance of saving. So, one of the practices that I had when I got my first job, or even with babysitting, was like to put some aside and then to have spending money. But particularly, I worked in a restaurant in high school. So, my paycheck went to savings and my tips went to spending. And that was just kind of like the easiest way. Here's a check, I send it right to the bank. Here's my cash. That's what I can use. So, I did kind of have that. As a foundation, and that was just kind of a habit.
Mhm.
They did though get me a credit card when I first started working, so that I could learn how to use a credit card well. And I did have a small car loan um, when I was a teenager going into college. And that was like their way of helping me to like learn how to work with debt well. So that was like kind of a lesson that I unlearned as I got a little bit older. But yeah, so that was a little bit of my background, and then yours was
She
different than
she got all the good habits. I didn't, like, my family did not. There was a lot of money fights growing up. Um, all I knew about money is that we didn't have enough of it, and that was a big problem. And so, like, for me, I ended up working a lot. Turned 16, and I, had 2, 3 different jobs. I worked a lot, but I also spent a lot too. I spent a lot of it on food and fine dining at fast food restaurants, and like a lot of video games, and just all of that was I honestly spent so much money. Because like I didn't feel like I was lacking, because I wasn't in a spot where I couldn't get whatever I wanted. My parents didn't have to, like, I didn't have to rely on them anymore to buy things for me. But I never developed any good habits. I didn't know how to use money though. Like, I couldn't use it to be successful with it. I wasn't thinking for the future at all. So I ended up finding myself at the end of college with very little savings. If I don't even think I had it, I was like, I had nothing. And it was just not a good place to be. So no good habits from family of origin.
yeah,
So
hardworking, but not
yes,
great
they're
with
very
saving.
hardworking,
Yes,
but like like,
the
yeah,
spending too. Yeah.
even up to now, like, even if as grandparents, if we were to ask them to get anything for the kids, they would absolutely like put up the house just to get them like, something. So, so we're not like that, but
Sure.
So then so you're coming at this, it sounds like, Monica, you're very much like, oh yeah, we're going to save this money, right? I mean, your paycheck went to savings. It was the tips that
Yeah.
you spent. And
It's
then
like the reverse 80/20. Most people spend
Yes.
80 and save 20. You were on the flip side.
and
Yeah.
then Renzo, it sounds like, I mean, it's like, I mean, I can relate. Oh, I've got a couple bucks. Let's spend a couple bucks.
Yep.
So when you got married, how did that work together? Because if you don't address that, you're probably gonna get really upset with each other and maybe not last very long in your relationship. But here you are, been dating since high school, you've been married almost 10 years. How has this worked out?
Well, so what I did, so the day before I proposed to Monica, a buddy of mine, he was working at his job as a janitor, like summer job, trying to make extra money. So I was with him. We're right out of college, or a year out of college, and I asked him, like, I don't make a lot of money. What do I do? So he recommended Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. So I read that whole thing in a week. Then I gave it to Monica to read. She finished it in about a week. And then I was like, all right, Monica, you're in charge of my finances. Because
So I agree with this.
I think this is great. Can
Let's
you
do
make
it.
sure we're good with this? And I kind of like just gave it all to her so I wouldn't. And like, yeah. So like money comes in, goes straight to our accounts and I'm not touching it. And yeah, that was how we started. Probably better than what could have been, but that wasn't a healthy thing to do. But that's how we initially started our relationship together with money. Was Monica's taking care of it.
So we are so grateful though for our friend like sharing that with us, because that was
Yeah.
probably like the best engagement and gift
Mhm.
anyone could give, is like, here's financial literacy. And it gave us a common language
Yeah.
to speak from.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't have this all in practice yet, but we could start like saying words and knowing what the other person meant.
Mhm.
And we could start creating goals and like taking baby steps to achieve them.
Yeah.
And so, for example, like we did this as we got engaged, and one of our goals was to definitely like contribute to the wedding without going into debt.
Mhm.
Another thing was to pay off my car before we got married so that we wouldn't go into marriage having that debt as well.
And then even thinking about like we're going to be renting, but we want to save up to be able to have a house, and just we finally had financial goals. Whereas I would say prior to that, all we were thinking was about how in love we were and how everything was going to work out. So like there wasn't really any thought about like what are we doing with money.
Right. And I don't know, we didn't start necessarily like budgeting every expense together at the beginning, but we had our paychecks. So after I had graduated from college and then you had already been working, we had our paychecks and we were kind of like paying our bills separately. And then some of them were starting to merge. But one of the things that we did on the side was we both coached athletics. So we both agreed that like our coaching stipends come in and then they go out to big purchases. Like we don't spend that other money that's like going towards the wedding photographer, or that's going towards I don't remember, some like a couch. Like we took that and we started to see how like our work translated into being able to have financial freedom to purchase things, but it also delayed the gratification. Like we couldn't do it immediately because coaching stipends kind of came in quarterly. I would say that was like our first real big good lesson of like, we can wait, we can live without this thing for a while until that money comes in. And I would say that started to motivate us to be like, okay, well then how can we start to like plan ahead and save for other specific things?
And I think also like we were motivated to live off of less. Like the apartment we first got was very tiny.
Yeah.
And like all of Dave Ramsey's jokes about rice and beans, like we kind of did take that to heart and like, all right, we don't have to rush out of this small apartment to get this huge house. So like we moved from like our little apartment to a very little house, very little square footage. It was a little cottage. But like we wanted to have a home, but we also knew like we can't live, like we're not going to immediately be living like our parents did. So like we're giving up a lot of those comforts. But that was like a conscious choice of like, okay, we're not going to be doing that, which is again, prior to getting married, we weren't thinking like that. We were thinking like, let's get married. We're going to get a big house. We have these things like, there's just a lot of things that we weren't prepared for. And we're happy we had some sort of language.
Yeah. And I think also, one of the things that we appreciated about getting on the same page with our goals was also getting on the same page with our occupational goals. So both of us went to school for like human services. So I was a Catholic school teacher when we first got married, and you're a social worker. So neither of our paychecks were ever going to like, there's not a lot of moving up and like, okay, at some point promotions will start coming in and, there's no commission, there's no what have you. Mm-hmm. And so we like looked at each other and we're like, okay, so either we live like this because we feel like this is what we've been called to do, and that means we have sacrifices on the other end, or we need to start thinking about changing our careers so at one point, like in some place there has to be sacrifice. And we prayerfully discerned that like our jobs were where God was calling us. So then therefore our spending had to reflect the kind of jobs that we committed to, and I think it was like a reframing of like, instead of being stuck in these low paying jobs, is like we're choosing to do this because this is what we feel like is right. And then therefore we have to make some tough decisions on the other end to support that life.
Do you desire to get on the same financial page with your fiance or spouse, but don't know how? All too often, we meet Catholic couples who assume the sacrament of marriage will be enough to prevent money fights, but it doesn't. Inviting God into your finances, intentionally merging your money, creating a unified vision for your future, and understanding prudent money habits is what will. If that sounds exactly like what you need, join us in an upcoming workshop we're leading on October 27th at 7:30 p.m. Central. It's called Money Together. We're leading the 3-part workshop live in one night with the goal of helping you get on the same financial page once and for all. Go to walletwin.com/moneytogether to register now. That's walletwin.com/moneytogether. I love that. If I can just jump in quick and just commend you for that. And the fact that you were budgeting, it got you thinking more intentionally. And then you actually had data to actually make an informed decision, where I think so many people, they're just kind of stuck in the grind and then a crisis happens and they realize that, this isn't working anymore. We actually don't have enough income that matches our spending. And then it's a huge event. But if you see it coming and now align your spending with what you plan on your income being, it just makes it so much easier. And a concept that we often talk about is what we refer to as maximum fruitfulness. So discerning for each of us, what is maximum fruitfulness? How is God calling each of us to serve in his kingdom? And our income is going to be reflective. And some it's going to be bigger, some it's going to be smaller, some it's going to be a vow of poverty. He's going to call all of us to have different relationships. And I just love that you committed to that discernment and stuck with it, because our culture, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like all I hear in Facebook groups and different places is just, you got to get that hustle on, you got to earn more, you got to just constantly increase your income. And it's not always true that we have to just almost be enslaved to finding the next gig to boost our income. And you guys discovered that secret of, let's just make the dollars coming in behave and match with what we're doing. And all of a sudden now we can answer God's call exactly how it's in front of us.
Yeah, it's just being intentional, like that you sat down and thought about it and prayed about it, and you discerned, like you saw, okay, one of these parts is going to change, right? The desires and the yearnings and like some of the material goods, or what the money side's going to look like. We're going to have to, there's going to be some sacrifices on that side, or these jobs that we love, that we were getting into, that I think maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. That's going to have to be sacrificed. And that you saw it that way, instead of just like, oh, we don't have any money and what are we going to do? And like, it was more of a very active or a very intentional discernment. And I think that is something that is a bit unique with having a Catholic perspective on finances, of understanding. Not everybody is going to have piles of cash. Not everybody's called to, be having, millions and millions of dollars in the bank. Sometimes we're called to live a simple life, and that's fine, right? It's okay to live a simple life. It's okay to have a bunch of money. But each individual call is unique to us. And so, that's just great to hear. That was really good.
Okay. So
because
take us back to the story.
No, I don't know where we were on the story. Sorry.
Go ahead. What were you?
Well, my thought was gonna be like, that's what I love that you pointed that out, because I feel like that's something that Dave Ramsey doesn't have in his message. Like, it's like you got to become a millionaire, and like that. There's that pressure of, and like for us, that was a struggle. It's like, well, we're not supposed to be striving for comfort. Like that's not congruent with our faith. So like that's not really what we like. We just hope to be able to provide for our kids, but like suffering comes, it comes. But yeah. So like, but there's an active discernment process to that too.
Absolutely. I do. I remember, we love Dave Ramsey. We've been down to his headquarters. We did our debt-free scream. We went down there for like a financial influencers event. We love him. We respect him.
He's good.
He's a lot of fun. But I remember listening to his radio show back in the day, and he was telling somebody that like had a lower income, just like that they need to get moving, in the other direction. And I was like, what would he say to a religious sister? if they call it. It's just
yeah.
not even
Right.
on the radar.
Right.
And there's very specific reasons that religious take vows of poverty. But again, it's not even something that a Protestant can even conceptualize, just because it doesn't
Yeah.
exist. So anyway,
Yeah.
there's some little differences just like that,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
our Catholic
And
faith
there's
can bring in a richness.
Yeah. And there's definitely times where like sometimes you do need to buck up and grind. Like, a major life event happened and you have to refill those savings, or you dipped into debt because of a medical thing or whatever. And yeah, sometimes you need to pick up the pieces by going to work extra or picking up a side job. And I think that that's also part of the good stewardship, though, of like, if I owe money, then that means I need to pay it back because I've borrowed from somebody else and they trusted me with that, and I need to repay that debt. And that requires me to work a little bit harder.
Yep.
So I do, I definitely think that there's a place for like that grind and that hustle every once in a while, but for that to be your life, then like what's the end goal? What are you hoping to achieve? Because there could always be the next. And I think that there is something very good about like simplicity too. And this is good.
And I think that was hard for us, well, at least for me, to like accept when we started having kids, because like then you start, all right, our house is kind of small now, and like I know
we outgrew our house at some point.
It was okay. It was okay when it was just two of us, but now like there's a child. For some reason, we got a dog, and like you start adding more kids to it, and then like we're like, okay, what are we gonna do? So that was also but like then we had to like really, all right, we have to budget more consciously and be more aware of our expenses. We have to constantly come back to that, like even 10 years in, like there's, you're like, all right, we have to go back to what we know works, and it's like we still don't have anything down even.
No, especially when you have kids still in the home. I feel like every 3 months our schedule changes, our budget changes.
Yeah.
It's just, we have a new family every quarter.
Yes. That's so true.
Brains have gotten to a different space.
Yes, exactly. That's so right.
Yeah, so it's to be expected. So as you were on this journey, you were getting on the same page. Were there ever any times where like it got hard, or your personalities were struggling to kind of stay on the same page?
I think there's been a few times where we've had to call each other out on like frivolous spending. So we both are comfort spenders, I think, when we're a little stressed.
I am a comfort put in the Amazon cart. I don't know if I always purchase it, but I'll put it in the Amazon cart, hoping that you will comfort buy it.
hoping I press buy. Yeah. So there's definitely some times where we kind of had to call each other out on the like, that wasn't really necessary. And you're like, yes, it was. No, it wasn't. So that's uncomfortable. I mean, there's definitely, I think there haven't been a lot of tensions in much of that because of that like same page of the ultimate goal. So every once in a while when one of us like slips, it's like, oh, you're right though, because we had agreed on this certain goal. And then maybe if we feel like that goal needs to be adjusted, this might be a time to like, this is highlighting that needs to be brought back to conversation. Maybe moving in 6 months really needs to be more like a year, or maybe buying a new car actually like really needs to happen next month instead of 2 years from now, whatever. So sometimes those are like keys to have like clues to having a deeper conversation. But big time wise, I don't think so. I think one time that was really hard was after our son was born, getting like the final hospital bill. The first time we were like, whoa, having a baby is very expensive and we need to like get on that. And that was tight. And then I think another big time of a lot of uncomfortable conversations was looking at houses. Like, what do we really want in a house? What do we really need in a house? What is a realistic budget? How much are we putting down versus how much should we save in case we need to like, fix things up? What's a realistic monthly payment? Those are difficult. Like, they're uncomfortable, but I don't know if they caused tension in the relationship, so to speak.
Yeah, I do tend to, though, like if there is a problem, I kind of am like, it's gonna work out. I do know I have like that's part of my personality, like it's gonna work out, and I know that that's throughout our marriage, like that gets annoying because they're like, okay, yes, but we need to budget.
But we actually like for that to work out. Sometimes there needs to be a plan. You're right, but no, and yeah, so I think, but that's so good though, right? Like it's the hard parts are so good because that brings out pieces of you that sometimes are good and can help the other, and sometimes it brings out pieces of you that need to be uprooted and removed. Like, am I overly conscious of money, like every single penny, and do I need to release some of that tension and control? Because ultimately, like our money is a gift to us, and it's not meant for us to like freak out about. It's meant to be like you keep saying good stewards with, but yeah, I think those difficult times are where like a lot of growth can happen.
I love that you answered that way. I mean, we've found fairly consistently, in our own story and then with other couples that we've worked with who've really made that transition into, budgeting together and getting on the same page, that there aren't huge, derailing explosions that come up now around finances, but there will be sometimes like a pothole. But they're good because it brings up maybe something that's just not working anymore. The phrase like what got us here won't get us there. I mean, it applies with our money, with our families. And we've noticed that sometimes when we'll get into a season of tension, it's flagging to us that like what we discerned as the goal or whatever, just now this is crushing us. And so they tend to be fruitful, even though they can still pop up and be hard.
Yeah.
So can you guys describe just some of we know that money touches everything, in our life. It's just got its hands in everything. What are some positive fruits that you've been able to see in your marriage and family because you put in the work to get onto the same page?
I like the fact that we don't have money fights the way that I grew up. I it's nice to let our kids they just have a very different childhood than I did in terms of like that, because like I'm not exaggerating when I'm like every single night there's an argument about money, and so to me that's a very big positive fruit, because like we can openly discuss money in front of the kids and we know how to do that. Whereas like when growing up, it was just there was no common language, there was just no understanding of how we need to do this, and then not feeling, at least for them, not feeling like we needed to like show them that we have money. I hope that makes sense. Like I know that my parents would overspend on presents on purpose so that I had something to brag about at school, for example, like so I can compensate, like can compensate for how little money we did have. And I know that like our kids don't look. We're starting to teach them to have an understanding of money, but they don't have they're not aware of things that I was aware of at their age that they shouldn't be. And I think that's a positive. Like they don't need to know that, oh, parents are struggling, or parents, anything like that.
I think I would agree with that. And I think it's been neat to even talk to our kids at different times about like why we're not making a particular purchase, because we haven't saved for it yet. And they get compensated for their chores. So they get to choose, how they spend their money. And we have those kind of money discussions. So it's been fruitful because we can have those at an age appropriate and stress-free level. I also I think we have found a lot of freedom when our finances are in check, that we can give of our time, and then we can also give more freely to other people who may find themselves in a difficult situation. We don't have a lot to share, but like, okay, you need money, sorry, you need a meal. We can cover, making an extra meal for a family that just had a baby or somebody that got sick suddenly or what have you. We can drive your kids around, because that extra, like tapping into extra gas, is not going to hurt us, and things like that. So we have flexibility in that. And then also the flexibility of time in choosing the occupations that we did. While we took a salary cut, we we are home for dinner every night with our kids because of our schedules, and we're able to minister to young engaged couples and have them over to our house just more freely because our schedule is more free. And again, those were intentional decisions of, okay, our finances may not be where some people think they should, but it's given us the freedom to do what we think God has called us to do with our time and our passions.
And we were able to cash flow grad school as well. Like that was
Yeah.
something that
Oh.
I don't think we would have been able to. But it took us like 8 years to finish it.
Yes.
So,
So,
like, there
we
was
both
just-
we both got our masters after being married, and we
Wow.
cash flowed them, but
Yeah,
it took
but
us a while.
It took us a while, but like that was part of like the discernment and sacrifice, and like, all right, God's calling us to this. But it took a lot to get there. But that's a fruit of just having that language too, because we could have easily just jumped into debt right after
Sure.
getting married,
Mhm.
and we'd be in a very different.
I love how both of you described the influence of, or the ripple effect of handling your money well, understanding that, being on the same page, and how it ripples out and affects your children and
Mhm.
shapes your family, right? It's right. Your parents didn't sit you down and go, okay, every night you bring up some problem with your money and you yell at each other about it. You kind of learn that, right? That's what you
Right.
saw, and
Yeah.
you now get to they're gonna think, oh yeah, well, you just talk about money, and I don't know, it's just like not a charged topic. Or
Yes.
when we see someone who needs help, we can help in
Yes.
whatever variety of ways they might need help. We say, okay, I'm going to take on a little bit of responsibility for you right now today, and we're going to get you whatever it is that you need. And
Yeah.
those things, right? In the same way that you, you, Monica, you got this kind of this, you save, kind of, drilled into you as you were growing up. They're going to see like you help and you serve and you love
Mm.
brought into them, into like a part of who they are. And
Mm.
I mean, what a beautiful fruit to come out of you actually paying attention to your finances. And that's
Yeah.
going to make your children more compassionate people. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to hear about, so thank you for sharing some of those fruits. I'd love to hear about, do you guys and I know this is kind of like a vulnerable topic, and if you feel like it's too much, you don't have to answer, but any dreams that you have for your future? Because oftentimes, we have to be prioritizing the money for different dreams that we might have out there. Jonathan and I have a dream of having a cabin because I watched Dan in real life, and I have to have a cabin. Have you seen that movie?
I have seen the trailer.
Okay. Well, you have to go watch Dan in real life now.
It's
but
enjoyable.
It's like
That's
they do charades and they make pancakes and they all work out
The
together.
whole family's there.
They
It's just
sing.
It's a
All
movie,
because
but
they have this cabin.
yes.
So now I'd love to hear, so that's like a long term for us where it's always going to be in our budget. Like we're going to be tucking that away to protect that dream. Do you guys have any that's unique to your family?
So one of our dreams, one of our dreams is when we become an empty nest. We take the summer off and we take an RV across the country and just like stop in different places along the way, and it just be the two of us. And like a kid could fly into one place if they want to, but they're not welcome.
We have a couple of friends.
They're not welcome on the whole trip.
No.
But just to like kind of, just to like to celebrate like the hard work and like the fruit of the hard work of now, like us time again, and like we've given and we've worked and we've saved and we've given, and just to kind of like sneak away for a little bit, and not have to like worry about other things for a little bit, just a little bit.
I like that.
And we would like to
drive
help.
the RV.
Probably me. I'm the driver in the
I'll drive
in the
RV.
marriage. Sometimes I do most of the driving now. And then we would like to help contribute to our kids' schooling when they're older, whatever that may be. We hope that some of them actually like choose trade school or things like that, because they're underappreciated occupations out there. But we'd like to help, but not pay for all of it, like on purpose, but to just to lighten the load, but to have them like contribute and be a part of the load. At that point, we hope their financial literacy is one that when they make their post high school decisions, it's a part of their discernment process and their thinking and consideration. So, but we would like to. Do you have any dreams? Those are my dreams.
Those are I'll go along with those, but I honestly just want to pay off the mortgage.
Yes, that's true.
And then not have to worry about that. I'm like, I'm very simple. Like, that'd be great. And then
own our house.
And that's it.
Yeah.
You know, I think we should hang out more. I'm seeing a lot of personality similarities here. So after the podcast, we'll have to hang out virtually again sometime.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Because it's coming. But yeah, we've got a big RV trip, like a year long on the road at some point.
It's
in our
a dream,
future.
but
we'll see when it comes. We'll see. In God's time.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for being willing to share your story. It's just been a delight to have you. And I know that there's people listening to this that are hearing that there's hope, you know, that two people with different upbringings can actually learn the same language, merge their money successfully, and then have it be a source of peace and not a constant source of tension. So I just appreciate you for being vulnerable and honest and sharing your story tonight. It was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, and if folks enjoyed hearing from you as much as we did, where can they get more of you online?
Sure. So we are on Instagram at To Become Family. And then we host a podcast, Pre-Cana with the Pope. It's our goal is to restore confidence in marriage and family life. So it's for engaged couples and dating couples, but also married couples, to just talk about the practicals of life in light of our faith, and we rely heavily on the intercession and the wisdom of St. John Paul the Great.
Okay. So anywhere they're listening to podcasts, they can look that up, and then they can go to tobecomefamily.com.
Yes.
And that's where you are on social media. Okay. Awesome.
Great. We'll have links to all of that in the show notes.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. And one more I forgot to add. We have written a children's book, and Renzo wrote a consecration book for adults to St. Joseph. So families can consecrate themselves to his intercession and his protection. So Go to Joseph is the adult book, and Go to Joseph for Children is for children. And they're both 10-day consecration. So it's manageable to do as a family. So that is something his intercession has done everything for our family. He has saved our marriage. So we thank him for that as well.
I love it. Okay. Wow. We're going to have to get those consecration books. Sounds awesome. Thank you for putting in the effort to get those out to people, to write that. Awesome. We will link to that in the show notes. Yep. And again, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for being here. And until next time, everyone. Bye for now. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. You can learn more about this show and the Wallowin program at wallowin.com.
Music in this episode's from Dylan Gardner. Listen to his new album, Almost Real, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your music. See you next week.